Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Deer and wild game hunters love this time of year, and some of them plan for months the different ways to attract wildlife to a certain area. One option is a food plot, but a lot more goes into creating and maintaining a food plot than you might think. Simply put, a food plot is an area of crops planted for wildlife to eat. But before you get started, experts say it's important to narrow your focus and really think about what you want to achieve. Dwayne Elmore is the OSU Extension State Wildlife Specialist.
A lot of people go into the food plot thinking that it is going to increase the carrying capacity of the land for whitetail, but often what they end up doing is just changing the distribution animals will associate with the food plot, but it may not actually increase the number of animals. So that being said, you need to really consider, are you willing to invest what it will cost, because it could be several $100s per acre for a food plot.
If the answer is yes, start at the County Extension Office with a soil test and ideas on plants that will work well in your area of the state.
And you're not just going to be able to throw seed out and expect to have much attraction. You're really going to have to spend some effort and time on proper seed bed establishment, and then getting that seed to germinate, and some weed control and fertilization. And if we're in a drought period, all that could be for nothing if we don't get the precipitation. So that's a gamble you're going to have to take. One landowner who did take the gamble, Andy Wooliver, who bought this Cleveland County farm about a year ago.
I wanted to plant a warm season annual to kind of help build the nitrogen back up in the soil, and it kind of wildlife management just kind of fit what our long-term goals are with the property. The property was heavily grazed for many years. It had been leased property prior to us getting it, so all of our native species, our native grass species, were almost all but eradicated.
Andy planted a number of different varieties, and then the summer rains arrived.
All of this stuff got a really good start, and then we had a couple of dry periods there after, about June 15th or so, and it's told us a lot about how different species perform next to others, and how wildlife prefers certain species.
Andy worked closely with Cleveland County Extension educator Heath Hergy.
It all kind of started with just taking soil samples to them and starting a conversation, and a year later this is where we're at.
Heath, just kind of give me an idea of what you and the landowner have done and what you've set up out here. What's the overview?
Well, initially Andy and I had worked together with soil sampling in our extension office there in Norman, and we decided that it would be something a lot of people would be interested in learning more about. We're seeing a trend in land management these days where folks are purchasing property solely for recreation in non-traditional ag farming and ranching, going more towards wildlife conservation and hunting and fishing recreation, and that's what Andy's obviously purchased this property for. I'd worked with him a couple months on his food plots and soil recommendations, and I said, what kind of varieties do you plan to plant? And he said, well, I'd like to try some different things. And I said, well, let's just see if some seed companies will work with us, and we'll put together some plots and actually make it a public demonstration to teach people about food plots and wildlife nutrition and wildlife habitat management.
In looking out across these acres, there's quite a variety here. Let's kind of start with these soybeans. Talk about this variety and how this is organized.
Okay. Well, as we all know that we have the new GMO crops available now around the world that are Roundup ready versus a conventional soybean. We actually incorporated a grain sorghum into this mix just to see kind of the mutualistic relationship between a legume and a grass. We were fortunate to have a good rainfall year here in Cleveland County, and so these obviously look very good, and we're very proud of the way that they look.
Okay, let's walk down the field and take a look at some of your other varieties.
Okay.
Heath, a lot of people in Oklahoma may not necessarily have seen this type of variety.
Right, and one of the things that a lot of wildlife managers are interested in are milo varieties that are more palatable and lower in tannin. and the tannic acid in the red milo that we looked at earlier is a lot higher and generally less palatable for wildlife species. This is a white milo that you see, a cream-colored grain sorghum. This mixture has cowpeas, soybeans, and it actually had a black oil Petrovic sunflower in it as well, which give you all the elements, the nutrition in the summer, and then of course your seed-producing plants for fall and winter for wildlife on your property.
We've talked a lot about the plants. What kind of things have you learned about the animals out here and observing their trends and what they're interested in and what they're not interested in?
Well, that's a good question, and we actually, Andy and I, actually put up exclusion cages in every plot we planted to be able to tell what the browse pressure is both inside and out of the cage. And what we found is that deer in our lighter seeded areas, which we'll see in a moment, the deer actually use those more than the heavier planted areas like we see here behind us. And so that would be something good for landowners to keep in mind when they're planting their food plots, to always plant at the proper seed rate. A lot of people think a little seed's good, a lot's better, and as most farmers know, that's not the case.
Okay, let's go take a look at those other areas as we kind of wind down our tour here.
Okay.
It looks like the deer really liked this spot for sure.
Well, that's right. And so what we have, and a lot of landowners can learn from this, we didn't expect to see the browse pressure here that we did until later in the season. As we got a little drier and some of these varieties of soybeans, cowpeas, and lab became a little more mature, we started to see the travel patterns on Andy's property here as they fall out of these topo features on your property and come out into these crop fields. You can see heavier utilization in these areas, and that's where a utilization cage or an exclusion cage is a great way to gauge your deer density and be able to tell if you need to harvest more does on your property.
And for landowners who are interested in setting up something like this, it's really important to do your homework.
It is. You know, basic farming practices. We have folks in every county across the state and many experts at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater that can help folks learn more about, you know, basic ag practices. And there's a lot of books available too, you know, for OSU. We've produced the Food Plots in the Southern Great Plains book that they can purchase, and Dr. Dwayne Elmore was involved in that. And that's a great resource for folks to learn about the basics of food plots and attracting wildlife to their property.
Okay, Heath Hergy, our OSU Extension educator in Cleveland County, thanks so much for having us out.
Thank you.
And for a link to the book that Heath mentioned, you can just go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Cold air snuck into Oklahoma last Saturday morning, October 19th. A map showing the number of days with lows equal to or below 32 degrees shows how that cold air crept in, bypassing the northern town of Buffalo, but creeping as far south as Altus, Acme, and Ada. 3 sites on this map in and close to Dewey County in northwest Oklahoma seem similar. Camargo had 3 days with freezing temperatures. Sealing and Putnam have had 2. We get a very different picture of the cold air in and around Dewey County from an hours below freezing map. Camargo has recorded 12 hours at or below 32 degrees with a minimum temperature of 28 degrees. Sealing has had 9 freezing hours, getting down to 29. Putnam has only recorded 1 hour below freezing with a low of 31 degrees. Longer times below 32 and colder minimum temperatures cause more plant damage. Comparing this fall to a map showing the average dates of the first fall freeze, we are about average for the Panhandle and northwestern locations, but a week earlier in the southwest and 10 to 14 days earlier than average for select locations in the central part of the state. Soil moisture is a big issue for wheat and canola crops. Checking on plant available water from the surface down to 16 inches, soils in the green areas with 3 to 5 inches of plant available water have good supplies for fall plant growth. The yellow areas are areas of concern with slower growth likely. Brown areas with values closer to a ½ inch are much drier, where the lack of moisture will really hold back fall plant growth. On our 16-inch plant available water map, Medicine Park comes in at 1 inch. Not far away at Apache, the plant available water is much better, 2 51/100 inches. A graph of soil moisture over the last 30 days for Medicine Park shows that while a number of light rainfall events have spiked the red line, Mesonet's 2-inch soil moisture sensor, only the rain at the end of September reached the 10-inch sensor, the orange line. Since then, the soil moisture at 10 inches has declined through October. At Apache, both 2-inch and 10-inch soil moisture levels were recharged in late September and have stayed high since then. The 24-inch soil moisture, the green line, shows a slow, steady decline over the last 30 days. The outlook for November from the Climate Prediction Center indicates that Oklahoma has a higher chance of above normal temperatures in November. The precipitation outlook for November is showing equal chances of being drier, mid-range, or wetter, so no clear trend for most of Oklahoma. Unfortunately, chances increase that it will be drier than normal in the southwest, far west, and panhandle areas. Thanks for being with us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, big news out of Argentina and Australia this week. What's the situation?
Well, the situation is lower expected production in both Argentina and Australia, but the big news is out of Argentina, where the wheat prices are reported to be up around $17 per bushel. They exported a large percentage of their wheat. Their wheat stocks are extremely short. Their harvest isn't going to start for another 2 or 3 weeks. There's riots in the street because of the cost of bread and the cost of flour. Argentina may not export any wheat until we get into the January or February time period. And of course, Australia, with now expected lower production and maybe some protein problems in that wheat, their exports will be less than we expected a month ago.
Okay, back here at home, we're starting to see some green in the fields. How's production looking?
Well, the Oklahoma wheat crop looks just excellent. The USDA released their crop conditions reports. The majority of the wheat is into good to excellent conditions, much better than we've seen the last couple of years. And you look at the wheat prices, the Oklahoma wheat prices, they've increased almost $1 over the last few weeks. Your harvest price now is somewhere around $7.
Okay, and in terms of supply, how are we looking?
Hard red winter wheat stocks are tight because of the good protein. We've had excellent export demand for our wheat. I think USDA's September report has it about 181 million bushels, 5-year average around 300 million bushels. Right now, the Oklahoma producer with wheat is sitting in relatively good conditions. Now is probably a pretty good time to pull the trigger on some of it. We could have higher prices unless Argentina and Australia come in more than we expect they do.
Okay, good perspective. And here on SUNUP, viewers talk, we listen. They want to know more about canola, so what's the canola story?
Well, you look at canola, it's planted, it's in relatively good conditions. Probably a home run would be 300,000 acres. They're probably going to come in more 250 to 275, something like that. The price has fallen since harvest, but if you're looking out to June, the estimate's somewhere around $19 to $20 a hundredweight.
Okay, keep us posted. Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist. We'll see you next week.
Some Oklahoma cow herds that have spring calving operations are keeping extra replacement heifers this year in order to build back from the downsizing that we had to do during the drought. If we've got some bred replacement heifers that we plan to have calve next February and March, now's the time to evaluate those heifers in terms of their body condition so that we can be moving towards having them in a body condition score 6 at the time that they calve next spring. An example of a heifer that I think is in that proper body condition is the one on the screen. She's very, very smooth to look at. She's not obese, but yet she's got enough stored body energy in the term of fat on her so that when she calves, she'll have enough colostrum to get that baby calf off to a good healthy start, and she'll have the capability to repair a reproductive tract and recycle to have a chance to rebreed to be on time for the subsequent calf crop. So how are we going to feed those replacement heifers during this fall and winter season so that they're in that body condition score 6 category at calving time? Couple of options. If we've got some good quality grass hay available for those heifers that make up a good portion of their diets, then we can supplement that hay with a high protein, say a 38-40% cube with a couple pounds per head per day, at least until winter sets in and we have bad weather when we might have to increase the amount of supplement with something like a 20% range cube or bring in some alfalfa hay to make sure that those heifers continue to gain at about a pound a day. If we've got wheat pasture available, that too can be an adequate supplement for those growing replacement heifers. I'd suggest that we don't put those heifers on it full time because we'll get too much weight gain, too much flesh, and have them too fat at calving. That could increase the possibility of difficult calving. Rather, I'd put those heifers on the wheat at least one out of every other day. And producers tell me that if you're going to alternate days with wheat pasture, often it works best if they're off onto the dry grass, the warm season pasture, whether it's native or Bermuda grass, for 2 days. Because if we just go every other day, those cattle will have a tendency to want to just, on the off day, stand at the gate and wait to be turned back in on the wheat. So we can use this wheat pasture as an excellent supplement for these growing replacement heifers if we do it judiciously. But the goal still is that pretty narrow target of having those replacement heifers in a body condition score 6 at calving time so that they will do the job that we want them to do, but not have the additional problems of calving difficulty if we get them too fat. Keep that in mind. You'll have a successful calving season with those replacement heifers this year. And we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
When it comes to land management, not only do producers have to coax from the ground the plants they want, but also fight to keep back the plants they don't want. Here's SUNUP's Austin Moore with some unexpected warriors joining that fight.
Saltcedar is a wanted plant, designated one of the 10 worst noxious weeds in the United States.
And so along the East Coast, they would plant it because it could handle high salt. So the tides coming in, it could handle all of that salinity, and it was planted mainly to help maintain or prevent that erosion of those banks or those beaches. Then people moved west, and as they moved west, they took it with them. And we have really planted a lot of it for soil erosion control, especially in areas that have high salinity. And so along the western coast of the U.S. and the southwestern part of the U.S. along those river systems, it escaped and has just really run rampant through that system, is now even in Montana and the Dakotas.
Though the amount of water these plants use individually has often been exaggerated, the toll they take on the landscape has not been.
So it can redistribute salt from underground water sources. So from the groundwater, it'll bring it up and it excretes it. That's why it gets its name, salt cedar, because it excretes that salt on its leaf surfaces. And then a thunderstorm event or rainfall event comes, washes that salt down onto the surface of the soil, and that really changes that salinity level and inhibits the native species.
But now, on the western edge of our state, the plants are dying. Oklahoma State University entomologist Tom Royer introduced me to the reason: Saltcedar beetles and their larvae. These insects were released as a control in 12 different western states, including Texas in 2006.
And as it turned out, the beetle doesn't recognize state borders, and it spilled over into Oklahoma and it started establishing along the western portions of Oklahoma.
As of this year, Saltcedar beetles have been found in 17 Oklahoma counties and they are spreading, but only to salt cedar.
And there's been extensive research trying to get it to eat other plants and to see what its host range would be, and it's very specific to tamarack species. So we can be very confident that this isn't going to move over and do anything else.
Which makes the appetite of these little bugs a great weapon for Oklahoma landowners.
The thing with the beetle is that it's not going to eliminate salt cedar, but it's going to allow it, reduce it and weaken it enough so that other native plant species can probably better compete with it.
So that's why a lot of times people have integrated mechanical removal, fire, herbicide treatments, and done that to try to knock it back or keep it in check. But now with the salt cedar beetle coming in, that's just going to be one more management practice that is going to enhance the success of those landowners that are trying to control it.
In Harmon County, I'm Austin Moore.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk about being able to hold a couple of wires while you're soldering them.
Okay, so you can buy a commercial device that looks like this.
It's got a lot of ball joints on it. It moves in a lot of different directions, and if you're going to do a lot of soldering like this, it's probably a pretty good investment to have.
But you could also, with some single-strand copper wire and a couple of alligator clips, make your own and put it in a vise, and then you can clamp your pieces in there and adjust them to where you'd like to solder them together, and you've got your self-made, homemade little clamping device.
The nice thing is the copper wire is stiff enough to hold it in place while you are doing that.
So there's a little tip on being able to solder with hands-free.
We'll see you next week on Shop Stop.
Well, the doors to the federal government have been unlocked, and that has unleashed a lot of numbers, and we have Darrell Peel here to go through them. Darrell, what are you finding in the numbers?
Well, with the data beginning to come back online, we confirmed that cattle markets in general and beef markets continued to strengthen over the month of October. Box beef prices have advanced sharply in the last few days. They're very close to that sort of magical $2 a pound mark. We pushed past that briefly in the spring for the first time ever. We should go back past that any time now, perhaps in the next few days, and be there for the rest of the year more than likely. Fed cattle prices also advanced sharply from the lower 120s to the upper 120s, and actually touched the $1.30 a pound range recently. Again, that's very close to a record level. All of these are things that we sort of expected to happen in the fourth quarter of the year. Feeder cattle prices continued to advance. The heavyweight feeder cattle have been the strongest relative to calves, but in the last few days it appears that the lightweight calves, the weaning calf prices have advanced sharply as well.
Okay, one thing that's happened over the past couple weeks, a lot of the wheat's in the ground across the southern Great Plains, and a lot of potential for wheat pasture in Oklahoma and the southern Great Plains. Let's talk about that.
Certainly it's the most potential we've had in several years in terms of winter grazing in the southern plains. We're perhaps a little bit behind where we would really like to have been, but it's going to come on, and we have considerable opportunity here. I think the demand for the stocker cattle is kicking in, and that's part of what we're seeing in these higher calf prices. We'll see a bit more of that. We're just now kind of buying those calves as we sort of confirm that we're going to have some wheat pasture, and so we're seeing a bit of a counter-seasonal move. Instead of a fall low of prices, we're actually going up because I think the demand is pushing past the available supply at this point.
Okay, let's talk about that. There's a guy that's got some wheat pasture. He's thinking about purchasing some cattle. Is it worth doing it right now? Is it economically feasible?
I think a lot of producers, and maybe even more so their lenders, are pretty scared of these high prices for these calves. They are extremely high prices, but if you pencil out the margin that's in there between the buy price and the sell price, and that gross margin, or that value of gain, if you will, it's actually still very attractive. Now, as these calf prices advance, we're whittling down on that, and it's all kind of relative to what the feedlot cost of gain is pushing towards. But the bottom line is there's considerable opportunity. It takes a lot of dollars to do that because of the price levels we're talking about. but the margins are actually pretty attractive. In Oklahoma, we have a habit, a long-term tendency to want to buy these 4-weight calves, and I guess I would just encourage producers to pencil out some alternatives around that. There's actually a little bit better value, I think, at this point in time for maybe moving up 50 or 100 pounds in weight and buying a 5-weight calf all the way up to 600 pounds. There's ample opportunity to buy those calves, put the weight on them, and see a good value of gain.
Okay, Darrell Pill, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Today we're going to visit about the products that are gluten-free, and you can find them in the market now in a larger number. These products are made for those individuals that are sensitive to gluten, or that they have the celiac disease. There are a series of grains that are used as cereals to make products such as cookies, breads, breakfast cereals. And they do contain either amaranth, quinoa, rice, and corn. Those are the most common, but they can also contain potato and other products. These individuals then have to get adjusted to the texture because the protein that is in the gluten is very unique, that it can hold the gases as they are produced during baking. And they hold the structure until the starch is gelatinized and it sets the structure. That's why we have these nice bread structure that we know of. All the gluten products are heavier because that structure is not present, the gluten is not present, but otherwise they can survive with not gluten-containing products.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.